Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Ministry of Tourism's special interview program, Tourism One-on-One, where we explore topical issues affecting the tourism sector as we tackle the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm Kingsley Roberts, your host, and with me today is Acting Executive Director of the Tourism Product Development Company, TPDCO, Mr. Stephen Edwards. Good day, Mr. Edwards.
Good day, Mr. Roberts.
Today we examine the role TPDCO has been playing in the COVID-19 recovery effort. So, Mr. Edwards, tell me, what role did TPDCO play when the COVID-19 pandemic initially hit Jamaica?
Well, let's first start with the COVID-19 health and safety protocols. When the COVID-19 virus hit Jamaica, TPDCO immediately sprung into action, the staff at TPDCO, in developing our health and safety protocols in conjunction with the Ministry of Tourism and the Ministry of Health. This is a robust document that speaks to all activities in the tourism space, how we can safely operate during the pandemic if we follow these protocols. That document is available on our website at www.tpdco.org. It's a very robust document, and I would encourage anyone who works in the tourism space to peruse the document thoroughly.
So your team was front and center in terms of the process to develop the protocols?
Absolutely, absolutely. Our entire team worked together to develop the protocols. It has been a real rigorous process, but we did that in conjunction with the Ministry of Health. And after developing the document, we went ahead to move towards our second phase, which was the assessment of entities, tourism entities within the space.
Okay.
Assessment to ensure that they are abiding by the established health and safety protocols. That is outlined in the document.
Right.
So our team would visit every single entity upon request across the length and breadth of Jamaica to do an assessment to make sure that they're in compliance. If they're not in compliance, we'll work with them to make sure that they over time meet that standard that we require. And if they are in compliance, what we do, we issue a compliance certificate, a COVID-19 compliance certificate, which is a document that says to the public that this entity has put in all the necessary protocols and has consistently abided by it.
So tell me now, in terms of the resilience corridors, how do you help in terms of the monitoring of the corridors themselves?
Right, so at TPDCO, we realize that this is an unprecedented time. So all staff at TPDCO, all 211 staff members have been refocused to, in addition to their daily duties, refocused to address the COVID-19 challenge across Jamaica. And part of that would be surveillance exercises along the resilient corridors. So our staff is constantly monitoring every tourism entity across the length and breadth of Jamaica, whether they are COVID-19 compliant or not. Some of these activities would include unannounced visits to some entities, and sometimes announced visits as well. So it's a mixture. But in addition to monitoring the tourism entities, we also monitor entities that are off the resilient corridors. Because as you would recognize, the disaster risk management orders require visitors to remain within the resilient corridors.
Okay.
But in order to ensure compliance, our staff has been monitoring spaces outside of the corridors as well.
To see if visitors would be venturing there.
To make sure that visitors are not venturing outside of the corridors, and to ensure that integrity of the corridors are maintained.
So how does it actually work then? Is it that your team members just go in by themselves? Do they go with the police? people from the fire brigade, health department? Expound on that for us.
So we have a mixture of modalities. There are times when we have gone in with the Ministry of Health, but understanding the sensitivity of the space and what is required of our staff. Generally, we go in unannounced and in a casual fashion, just to discreetly inspect to make sure that the protocols are in place. So they might not know in some instances that we are there inspecting. But what is good is that...
So some of it might be mystery shopping.
That's exactly. Some of it might be mystery shopping.
Oh, okay.
And what we have found is that by far and by large, the tourism entities are doing the most that they can to remain in compliance.
Oh, so basically the response has been positive and people are seeking to comply? Is that
Absolutely.
what you're saying? Okay.
Absolutely.
So in terms of the hotels, you mentioned earlier you would have worked along with some to ensure that they got their certification. Expound on that for us. How do you work along with the hotels in
So part of the certification process would be to ensure that the basic standards for licensure are in place. Things like your health certificates, your fire certificates, your approvals from your statutory bodies like your municipal corporations and so on. So in a step to gain COVID compliance, we are working with certain entities to ensure that they meet the basic standards. That's the first step. As well, not every space is equivalent. They have some differences in their spaces, depending on the types of activities that they offer.
The type of property.
Right, because you can imagine that especially with attractions, tourism attractions are far-ranging in terms of activities. So what fits one entity might not fit another. So it's incumbent upon the staff at TPDCO to inspect the space, to identify gaps that may exist, and give advice on how they can fill those gaps and become totally COVID compliant.
All right, so talk to me now as it relates to the small properties. What's it like with the small properties? I know there would be some similarities, but they have less resources and would need more guidance. How do you work along with them?
Right, so small properties have been receiving help largely through the Tourism Enhancement Fund. In terms of resources, we recognize as a partnership at the Ministry of Tourism and its agencies that the resources available to the larger properties might not be available to the smaller ones. So we would make representation to the Tourism Enhancement Fund on behalf of some of these smaller properties who might find some challenges in putting in the protocols, putting in necessary.
So like the sanitization stations
right.
and those kind of things. So if they have challenges, you advocate on their behalf?
We would advocate on their behalf. And in addition to that, we have assisted the Tourism Enhancement Fund in distributing supplies that would mitigate the spread of COVID-19. Sanitization kits and materials to dispose of waste material that would have been generated through compliance activities and so on throughout the space. And we try to target the entities that are most in need. And this goes from smaller entities down to even your vendors that are part of the tourism space. You know, your jerk chicken man, your
fish vendors,
vendors, and so on. So all the players throughout the tourism space, we try to touch them and give some impact in that regard.
So what about the attractions now? You touched on it earlier. So whereas the properties tend to be quite similar, the attractions are different for the most part, and they are located all across the island. But you're dealing with the resilience corridors now. So how do you deal with that aspect in terms of going to the various attractions and working along with them?
Right. So attractions, we have we take the requests from attractions individually, and once we receive a request, we dispatch a team to go and do a full assessment of the property. Sometimes the activities at the attraction might be in line with the protocols that we have established already.
Right.
For instance, if you look at the protocol document, it would speak to things like use of swimming areas and so on. So if their activities are in alignment to what's already established, then it's clear what protocol should be in place. But outside of that, the team would do individual inspections of the particular activities at that attraction, and to identify what are the risks of spreading the virus, spreading COVID-19. After that, we'd consult Ministry of Health to see what are the mitigation efforts that we can put in place, and then we make a recommendation to the attraction.
Okay. All right. That brings us to the end of our program. Thanks for joining us today, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts.
Thanks to our viewers for tuning in today, and join us next week when we conclude our discussion on the role that TPDCO has been playing in the COVID-19 recovery effort. Take care and stay safe.